a couple of squares on my drinking game where it's still very early, it's too close to call, and blue wall was my right bower. But as things unfolded, what I noticed really quickly was there were no surprises. And the late campaign narrative that was at play out there was that we could maybe expect some surprises. There was this notion that the wheels had fallen off Trump's campaign, that it was collapsing, that there was a real sense of panic within his team about how the numbers were looking, that he was seeming tired, he was seeming almost defeated, that Harris had the momentum. So I was anxiously looking for some signs of some surprise. And what did we see instead? Trump was competitive everywhere, and especially in the battleground states that he needed to be throughout the course of the night. There was no massive surprise on the Harris side of things. It's not like there was no holy shit moment. Look, she won that state. We didn't see that coming. None of that happened. And so the longer it went on, the more that the numbers lined up, that fleeting narrative that fasten your seatbelts, there could be some real surprises, didn't happen. And then it got very surprising to me watching the popular vote numbers, because let's remember in 2016, Trump lost the popular vote, but won the presidency thanks to the Electoral College math. This time around, he won decisively in the popular vote as well as the Electoral College.
Lindsay?
Well, to build off of what Bob was saying, this for me was, I was worried about a vote that wouldn't be definitive. I was worried about the consequences of being too middling and too close. This was not that. It was a definitive vote. And I think it was a definitive vote for definitive action. And I'm sure we'll get into messaging shortly. But Trump served up clear, concise, action-oriented items on his to-do list. And I think what sits underneath that is, this ain't about truth. This ain't about who delivers the message. It's about the story. It's the story of hope and a promise, I think, for an American dream that is slipping away. That's debatable perhaps, but it's this story that was served up that voters top to tip in that country leaned into. And I think it has really interesting potential implications for Canada as well.
Brad, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Lindsay on the storytelling piece. I think the myth of the man, that savior, the Messiah, who with all the character flaws, we heard over and over again, his supporters acknowledged his character flaws, but they didn't care. And I think this was more than Donald Trump now. It became, 4 years of people believing that that inflation was affecting them, and of course it was in many ways. But they really just grew tired of I think of the current administration, and I'm sure we'll get into all the flaws in Biden taking so long to step down, and that here we are now. I got to ask, if the Democrats stole the 2020 election, why didn't they steal this one then? Because it just, it's not making sense for me. And I think most Americans don't believe the Democrats stole 2020. They liked what Trump was saying as much as, in terms of his policies, air quotes for people not watching. So there's my hot take.
Anne-Marie?
Well, if you ask me, the question I think was what was my initial reaction, and it was, of course, an emotional reaction. I have lots of fears and anxieties and worries about what this means, and but the last week I started to suspect that the Harris government the Harris team was starting to was underestimating completely just how pissed off people were, and upset and scared and afraid. since 2020. And I talk about it a lot, and I know people don't want to talk about it, but the post-pandemic reality for the how people are feeling and the economy and that impact on people's daily lives. They just know that they didn't have these issues when Trump was in power. They aren't connecting it to the fact that we had a global pandemic, and but they are connecting it to that he just was, a magician and he's going to fix all of their problems. But I think the one thing I want to say before I forget is that what I really learned this last week was that pollsters and pundits, including all of us, are really talking out of our ass. We have no idea. And we really have to look at what pollsters are doing and how they're reaching the silent voters, that they aren't reaching them. So the polls are wrong all the time, but we seem to, we report on all of them. We talk about all of them all of the time. And that informs a lot of what pundits say. And as a result, they're so wrong. We're all wrong.